Welcome to the fourth and final in this series on spiritual warfare. Thank you once again for joining us. This is the lesson, we entitled it Angels, Demons, and Other Crazy Critters. And that's a quote from a teaching mentor of mine years ago as I was looking at some of this, and I was asking him, hey, what about this? What about this? What about angels? What about demons? What about these things? And he said, oh, no, that's all. Talking about the seraphim, he said, that's a whole nother crazy critter altogether. And so I give Bill Smith credit for that quote in Crazy Critters. And you know, it really is appropriate because you and I look at each other, we see human beings, we notice the difference. We notice the difference in our where we're from in the world, and there's certain physical characteristics based on some places that we live and our genetics and where we our DNA. But whenever we think about things we don't see, there's a whole nother level of what he would call crazy critters out there. We're going to spend some time looking and thinking about some of those. However, as we begin, I do want to have a few disclaimers, for lack of a better term. You're going to leave after watching this video saying, wow, okay, yeah, that's cool, I didn't know that. You're also probably going to leave thinking, I'm not so sure about that. And then you may be leaving thinking, I think I'm going to look at that a little bit more. This can hit you in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of information out there. We're just going to kind of put our toe in the water on some of this. And I don't want to be confusing, but also I want you to know, and we're all going to have to be okay with, there's not just definitive things that say this is what this is and why. And we're going to have to be okay with maybe not knowing some things and being okay with, let's keep thinking and studying. And that's all right to do. It really is okay to do. As I said in a previous video, it would have been so much easier if the biblical writers would have included several chapters on this is angels and their function and what they do. It would have been easier and said, this is exactly what a demon is. This is where Satan came from and why he did what he did, and this is how it happened, and this is what God was thinking all along. But that's not there. That's not there. If you're watching this video and you're from the United States or the Western, what would be considered Western Europe and Canada, North America, we're all going to struggle with understanding things of a spiritual realm. In our enlightened world, for whatever reason it is, in our culture, we begin to adopt more of a what you see is what you get mentality. Other parts of the world, other cultures, the East, the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, South America, the Caribbean, the Polynesian world, does not share that same value. They rely heavily and believe heavily in a spirit world, and to the point that we should all believe, I think, that the spirit world has direct impact on this physical world. And so understand that culturally and maybe in our upbringing, we've have some struggles that keep us from understanding. So the goal is to keep studying and to keep learning. There's a couple of thoughts as we delve into the understanding the spiritual world just a little bit. I do want to make you aware of something that's out there that's been around for a long time called dualism. Dualism is the idea that there is eternal good, eternal evil, and that they are battling with one another. And some tenets of dualism believe that what human beings do affect that balance of that. That's a very simplistic view of it. If we're shooting this video in the month of May right now, and for many of us who are Star Wars fans, on May the 4th, we said, exactly, may the 4th be with you. Of course, that's a Star Wars reference. And we know the Force, there's the good side of the Force, the bad side of the Force, and they're dueling back and forth throughout the whole movie. That's dualism. It's full of dualism. Now, there's problems with that. Does it mean you can't watch Star Wars? No, it doesn't mean you can't watch Star Wars. You just need to be aware that there's some bones and all that stuff out there you have to spit out, and just look at it for the entertainment value of it and not the theological significance, the theology maybe that is behind it. But there's some problems with that, of thinking about an eternal good and eternal evil. But we don't have time to do that, and there's a lot of tentacles that go with dualism. But be aware that it is a false teaching that is out there. We're going to spend some time today looking at those things that are for us and those things that are against us as we go through that. First of all, the things that are for us. You have angels. Angels are and there are other heavenly creatures as well. Angels are created beings that are created for they have different jobs and different purposes. They're basically there to do whatever God wants them to do. They appear to be immortal, meaning they don't die, but they're not eternal, meaning they can be destroyed. And we see that angels who did not keep their place, this is a biblical reference there, are kept in captive for judgment. I'm not sure what all that means, and we're not going to try to unpack that, but it does mean that they have, that when they're created, they don't die, but they can be condemned and they can be destroyed. We do know from Scripture that they have special insight and knowledge, though it is limited. It says in 1 Peter 1 that angels desired to look into what all the work and the mysterious stuff that God was doing, but they were not privileged to know. But human beings are privileged to know when it was revealed through Jesus. We know that they have power to help and assist and work in the lives and serve believers. We know that they can have a form. Even though they are a spirit being, they can appear and have some type of form. They can take on a human form. We see that in Genesis whenever 3 visitors visit Abraham. They were probably angels. And as we know, they were on a special mission. Hebrews says that we have oftentimes entertained angels and didn't know it, so be sure that you're kind to strangers, because they may be taking a form. Others seem to have a specific form. The cherubim or the cherub and the seraph, if they are indeed angels, seem to have a specific form. We'll talk about them as we move on. There are people who have, in the Bible, who have seen and witnessed angels, and it scared them. The idea that we often see in media and TV, that, they're just little beings flying around, and they're sweet and they're kind. Well, they may be, but most people that have seen an angel biblically in the Bible fell down as though they were dead. They're not all Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life, not sweet little old men that are there to try to help you in that particular way, though I guess they could be. Angels are there to help and serve and care for God's people. We see that in Hebrews 1. Matthew 4, they attended to Jesus after his temptation. We're not sure what that means, but they did take care of him. They're messengers and servants. We also see angels administering judgment. We see that with Sodom and Gomorrah. We see when David counted his fighting men, and we see the angel that is destroying 8,000 people, and God says, stop. It's a pretty cool story, because it says whenever they made the sacrifice, the angel then put his sword back into his scabbard. And you get this very physical, visual thing that David got to see. It seems as though that there are so many angels that they're innumerable. We really don't know how many they are. Though Jesus did say, when in the garden, he told Peter, you put that sword back up. Don't you know I can call however many he said down, and that seems to be a pretty good number he had at his disposal. The seraphim, or the seraphs, they're only mentioned once in the Bible. If they are an angel, they may be, as we would say, another crazy critter altogether, and they're mentioned in Isaiah 6. And their role seems to be one of worship, because we find them flying around the throne of God, singing holy, 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 or crying out holy, holy, holy. And I don't know if that's just a declaring of worship or if it's a declaration of warning that you're entering the presence of holiness. You better be careful. And maybe it's a little bit of both that they're there. The cherubim or the cherubs appear several times in Scripture. Mainly, it seems that they are guarding what is important to God. It is a cherub that was placed at the entrance of the Garden of Eden. It is the cherubim that come together, their wings come together to form the mercy seat on top of the Ark of the Covenant. There is also the archangel, Michael is mentioned. And while tradition and the apocryphal books tell us that there are 7 archangels, biblically in the Bible there's only one mentioned, that is Michael. He appears to be a warring angel, one that fought against Satan. Revelation 12, he also disputed with Satan over the body of Moses. We see that in Jude chapter 9. He fought against the prince of Persia, and that's in Daniel 10. And the prince of Persia seemed to be a higher order evil being, which we'll get to that in a minute, that whenever Daniel prayed, Michael was dispatched, and the prince of Persia fought him and detained him for a little bit. Protects God's people. We see that in Daniel chapter 12. And 1 Thessalonians 4 tells us that he will announce the final coming of the Lord. So we see Michael in and out a whole lot going on. Another angel we see is Gabriel. If he is an archangel, he's not called that, but we do see him showing up as giving messages from God. News or insight. He helps Daniel interpret the vision that he's had in Daniel 8 and Daniel 9. He announced the birth of John the Baptist, and he announced that Mary would conceive Jesus in Luke chapter 1. So there's a whole lot going on. That's just a quick skim into all of this. And there appears to be an order to things that we don't really know what that order is. Seems to be a higher order beings, good spiritual beings, and then lower order ones that do different things. And we'll see that on the flip side too. And that's what gets us to the things that work against us. There is probably the highest order of evil beings, which would be Satan. He carries a lot of names in the Bible and in different contexts. Now, we get into where did he come from? And there's a lot of, this gets a little tricky sometimes for people, so I'm just going to give you the traditional thought and where people get those ideas from, and you can continue to study it for yourself. There's a lot of people that do a lot deeper work than, of course, I do in this, and so I encourage you to go look at them. But hey, remember, carefully study and look. Spit out the bones. And just let the Lord lead you on that. Traditionally, people have gone to 2 texts and have pointed out where Satan comes from. Isaiah 14 is one of them. And this is what Isaiah 14, starting in verse 12, says. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn, you have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of the assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit. Now, you hear a lot of I in there. I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. And the idea of what some scholars believe that this is what Satan did, that it was his pride that caused his downfall. Some teachers believe that Satan, because of his name, was a worship leader for the heavens, and some people even believe that the earth was created to be a temple where God would meet with his people. And from Ezekiel 28, we get this idea that Satan was this guardian cherub, this being that was supposed to be the caretaker of this temple and led people in worship and facilitated the meetings with God. Is that true? It could be. Is it definitive? No. But it's really an interesting study. But again, some things we just don't know. Read here in Ezekiel 28, beginning here in verse 11. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament against the king of Tyre, saying to him, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You were the model of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you. Ruby, topaz, emerald, chrysolite, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as guardian cherub, so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. So you get this idea that this being was created to be a guardian cherub in the garden of God. You were blameless in your ways. From the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I drove you from disgrace from the mount of God. I expelled you, O guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth and made a spectacle of you before the kings. Now, you can see this idea of why people and teachers and tradition would lead us to thinking that this is Satan. There are, however, some interpretive problems. Isaiah, in context, is talking about the king of Babylon, and Ezekiel is talking about a lament taking up against the king of Tyre. Some people, some teachers, some scholars believe that they're using this as a simile, that like Satan, king of Tyre, like Satan, you had a job to do and you didn't do it. King of Babylon, you did exactly like Satan and had this done. So there's some interpretive issues there. Logically, it does make sense that Satan was a created being and chose to do evil. There's a lot of ins and outs to that. But what we do know is that he is a powerful adversary and that he is on the high end. If there's a spectrum or a continuum, he's on the high end of it and is in control of a lot of things and has deceived this world. In fact, John even says he is the prince of this dark world. And we operate in enemy territory. In his command are fallen and rebellious angels. As the Bible says, they chose not to keep their place of authority. They have seemingly the power to use natural forces to bring destruction. And actually, side note here, the good angels have the same power to bring that type of destruction if they need to. He works through evil people to bring harm and destruction. You see evil happening, evil people in charge, and influencing and using them in those ways. From Ephesians 6 and Daniel 10, there appears to be an order here where you have a hierarchy of higher order evil creatures and lower order evil creatures, to the point that maybe they even are over geographical areas, and then some to the point of just menacing and tormenting human beings. Some of those lower order ones, demons or evil spirits, there's a lot of thought. Are they fallen angels? Maybe. Some people believe they are evil people who have died and their spirits are disembodied and they're looking for something to inhabit, and they menace people. And they harm people. What they are exactly is we don't really know. Can they possess or oppress? We know they can oppress, probably to the point, as we going back to that spiral in the second lesson in this video series, is that the further we're down into this sensuality and impurity, we open ourselves up to all kinds of evil influences, and it's not a good thing to do. So what do we do with all this? It's said that the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II was a turning point for the Allied forces against the Axis powers, the Germany and Italy dictators that had taken over Europe. And it was a battle that raged for 6 months, the end of 1942 into 1943. And it was on the Russian front, and the Russians won. And they drove back the Germans. And they say that was the first time that the German command and the German people that had bought into the lies of the Third Reich actually believed, you know what, we may not be able to win. It's also said that it was the first time that the Allied powers thought, we might be able to win this thing. We might be able to stop Hitler and all the destruction that he's done and take back what has been taken from us. I had a professor tell me that when I was in college, that it was after that battle that the deaths in the concentration camps of the Jews began to increase. There were uprisings in the different ghettos, Jewish ghettos throughout Europe that Germany had controlled. And they would take them and ship them off, and there was an increase in the deaths and the murder of those people. And this is what that professor said so wisely. He said, after that, Hitler knew he could not win. And so he went to more of a terrorist style attack in order to destroy and to discourage and to take as many people with him before he was destroyed. And when Jesus Christ, this is what the professor said, when Jesus Christ rose from the dead, he knew that he could not win. He knew the battle was over. And his terrorist cells all throughout the spiritual world began to attack differently, to discourage, to try to destroy, to get people to succumb to evil and to be discouraged and to be disenfranchised and to begin to see the negative and to be cynical and to become ineffective as believers in Jesus Christ, and even to the point of even probably taking some of their lives and to be martyred. But he knows he can't win. We are fighting a battle that's already been won. We are reclaiming territory that was once belonged to the enemy, and as we, as believers, reclaim the territory of that God once had, we are following his lead. Our final reveal passage, as we get to look behind the curtain of what God is doing in this world, comes from 2 Samuel. David is taking on the Philistines again, and he's already taken them on once, and face to face. He inquired of the Lord, do I take them? He said, go get them, and David did. They came out again into the valley, and this is what happened. Once more, 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 22, once more the Philistines came up and spread out all in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, do not go straight up. Don't go straight up and attack them, but circle behind them and attack them in front of the balsam trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. So David did as the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines. David is in this forest waiting on the Lord's army to walk across the top of the trees. And when he hears it, I can just imagine the wind starts to blow. And whenever that gets out in front of them, they come out. Why? Because the army of the Lord has already gone out to defeat the enemy, and we join his army. When Jesus Christ rose from the dead, earthquakes happened. People came out of tombs. A veil indicating a separation between God was split open, and we have access to God. And we follow behind him in his lead as we battle on. In this war that's already been won, we claim his victory, well equipped and prepared with his armor as his soldiers in this world on his side.